just before the examinations were done. And this is something that, of course, many of us know. So, of course, that is a matter of concern, and that's our entry point. However, the question then remains, at what point do we need to educate our children on sexual education? Let's have this discussion. Like I've mentioned, the phone lines are open, and we're going to display the number as we go along, but you're also welcome to participate via social media. But let me start with you, Naitore. And at what age should we be introducing our children to sex education? Evidently, there is a problem.
Yes.
And the day and age we're living in today, they seem to be engaging in sexual activity way, way younger than it used to happen. Yeah. So there needs to be a discussion that is had.
Of course, one of the principles of comprehensive sexuality education is that any education that is passed on to adolescents, it should be age appropriate. Okay. That meaning, an adolescent who is 15 years and one who is 7, 8 years, they cannot get the same package of information.
Correct.
So it needs to be age appropriate. However, it needs to be done as early as possible, because we have 7-year-old, 8-year-old asking questions regarding their sexuality. So we cannot continue burying our heads in the sand, yeah? Because these questions are raising, and they are coming from the adolescents, from the children themselves. So the key principle is that it needs to be very age appropriate, but as early as possible. And teachers and education experts are in a position to really identify the specific age. But for me, I feel as early as possible.
As early as possible.
But it should be very packaged in a way that that is age appropriate.
Okay.
For
because
every
obviously
adolescent.
what you're telling a 15-year-old, you cannot tell, for instance, a 5-year-old. But then again, the question is, do we wait for that question to pop from them? Do we wait for them to ask the question? How do we know that it's time to talk to them about sex? Or sexual education.
Exactly. Actually, the problem is that we are waiting for them to ask the questions, and what we ought to do is to be prepared and know from the age, in terms of how children grow, by the age of 6, they're in a position to understand this. How do we start unpackaging this information to them, such that either in schools or even before they, whether they're in school and out of school, for those who are above 18 years, how do we package this information for them? Do we start by training them or giving them instructions around their body parts? How do we start packaging this information? And for me, I feel we are not addressing the root causes of these issues. We've mentioned the concern that was raised by the Minister of Education, which is really good that they are taking note of that. However, we need to address the root causes of these teenage pregnancies.
What do you think then are the root causes?
Firstly, lack of information.
Correct.
If you do not have information as an adolescent, you're not empowered to make life-changing decisions about your sexuality. We have the Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2014, which is a government data. That it was generated by the government, says that 1 in every 5 adolescents has either given birth or is pregnant. 1 in every 5. So we have, yes, we have this data, but what are we doing about it? We cannot just generate data but not address.
And then sit on it without necessarily taking action.
Exactly.
Right.
We need to take action. We need to implement. We need to see, what is this data telling us? It's telling us that children from as early as 15, because this data covered those from above the ages of 15, are engaging in sex activities. But what are we doing in schools and for those who are out of school?
Okay, so number one is lack of information. Any other root cause that you may think of?
Of course, of teenage pregnancies. The lack of information now cascades to other things, because now it opens adolescents, more so specifically girls, to sexual exploitation. They are being exploited. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So there comes someone, because of poverty levels, where people come from the low-income homesteads, they are told, maybe I can pay for your transport to school. So someone sexually exploits them. It could be a teacher. It could be the person who has...
Could be a relative.
A relative, yes. Could be a relative.
That's not unheard of.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And now, who's the custodian, and who do we task as responsible for that information? Because not too long ago, I remember there was a debate of introducing sex education in schools.
Yes.
But that doesn't seem to have worked out much, given the statistics that you're quoting. So who would be responsible for that information?
In the previous parliament, there's a senator who introduced the reproductive health care bill, but it did not receive the requisite support, so it never passed. That bill would have offered guidelines into how sexuality education is offered in schools. So ultimately, the state, the government has a responsibility. The government has a due obligations to ensure that the students, that the girls, the adolescents have information.
Just as the girls or the boys as well?
Okay, both adolescents,
Yeah.
both boys and girls.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit biased because I'm a women's rights advocate.
Yeah,
but yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. All of them need this information. But also, parents also have a role to play. So it's both.
So it's both. All right. And I was coming to that because my thinking is that the parent has a bigger responsibility because this is your child. Yeah. And also when you delegate it to the school or the student, I mean to the teacher, you have no control of age appropriate. You have no control of how much content they're going to give them. You have no control of what information and how they're going to relate. Would it not then be the responsibility of the parent or at least relatives? Because previously, culturally, the aunties and the uncles used to do that. I think it was taboo for parents to talk to their children about sex, although that may have changed now. But I would imagine that the relatives or let me say the guardians would have the bigger responsibility than the school or the teachers.
I absolutely agree, but we cannot shy away from calling out the government, especially the state, when they failed to provide information or education. Because to be honest, is adolescents, both boys and girls, most of the time they spend it in school.
Right.
However, it should start at home. Parents should be in a position to start having conversations with their children on sex education, on what to expect at a certain age, on relationships, on reproductive health rights. Absolutely, parents ought to do that. However, ultimately, the state has a bigger responsibility, and especially more so that most of our adolescents, the age of adolescents, most of them are in schools. And like those ones who are in boarding schools, they will be away for an entire term. The parents may not necessarily have as much time as with their children. So when they're in school, and it's more regulated, that's my point. I'm not saying the parents are excluded from this, absolutely not. In school, it's a bit more guided. A lot of research has gone into that. There's a lot of investment around that, and therefore it should be given in school. But parents also have a very key role. Yes.
All right, then also comes in the question of tradition and culture.
Yes.
Because again, in the African context, we have certain things and that play out in our culture. Yeah. What role do you think culture has in all this to ensure that we balance? Because some of the cultures, I mean, we could go as far as FGM. That is cultural.
Yes.
There are some of the cultures that marry off their young girls as early as 9 years.
Yes.
That again is culture. What role would culture play in ensuring we change that thinking?
Those are harmful cultural practices, and they are prohibited in all our laws. Female genital mutilation, early child marriage, and even those cultures that propagate sexual violence or marrying of children, adolescents, when they're still in school. They're harmful traditional practices. Now, comprehensive sexuality education from a human rights perspective recognizes that all cultures are not the same. So it should suit the different contexts
of each culture.
Therefore, like Kenya, we can look at ways in which it's appropriate to transfer this information in a country like Kenya. It may not be the same in the West in terms of how this information is passed on to the adolescent or to the young ones. However, we cannot downplay the role of culture because in most cases it really influences so many aspects of our lives and also in terms of schools. And our biggest concerns on why comprehensive sexuality education is very critical as an organization, Equality Now, is the fact that the failure to offer this information to girls, first you're violating their right, and I'm really emphasizing on the girls because they bear the burden. They're the ones who will get pregnant, they will drop out of school, and there'll be a ripple effect in terms of the
quality of their life, even later on. Yes. But when And right there, let me ask you, because this again becomes a question of concern. When we concentrate so much on the girl child and leave out the boy child, as much as, yes, I agree that the girl child is probably going to face harsher consequences, but she doesn't get pregnant on her own. We need to involve the boy child as much as the girl child, because they need to see the effect. They need to see the impact of their behavior. So shouldn't we also be concentrating on the boy child, because the girl child will not get pregnant on her own?
Sexuality education should be offered to all adolescents, whether boys or girls. However, we need to underscore the fact that the person who will really be affected should a pregnancy occur is the girl. The people who are sexually violated a lot, the statistics are girls. And the pregnancy may not necessarily come from even a classmate, a fellow boy in school. It's outside. It could be teachers. Yes, it could be. So our key concern is the fact that the failure to offer this sexuality education, it's leading to sexual violence. Girls are being left vulnerable to coercion, to sexual violence, to sexual exploitation. And it's from everywhere, at home, at the community, and even in schools.
And even in schools.
Yes.
All right, then comes in the question of consent, because we also wanted to talk about that. Yes. And I'll give you a scenario. You have an 18-year-old who, according to the laws of Kenya, 18 is adult, and therefore they are responsible for their actions. But maybe they're dating a 15-year-old. What does the law say about that?
Now,
and that's happening a lot.
Yes. I agree with you. And even the judiciary, the courts have noticed that so many cases whereby there's a child who is even, at times it can even be a 16 and a 14-year-old, 18. So the moment you're an adult, you have legal capacity. If it's between, if you're no longer a minor, the moment you get to 18.
So you're responsible for your actions?
Yes, you are, absolutely. And the law stipulates if it's defilement or whether it's rape. If you engage in sexual activity with a minor, then that's defilement. You're defiling that child. And the Sexual Offences Act should kick in, absolutely. Now, but the biggest concern is whereby we have two minors,
right?
Like maybe one a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. Now, our proposal is, because we are looking at reviewing the Sexual Offences Act, which is the comprehensive act that looks at the various sexual offences, is that there needs to be some reviews in terms of the law. We need to acknowledge the fact that there are adolescents who could be in relationships. Yes.
Okay.
And that law needs to be reviewed in as far as that. Many people have proposed the Romeo and Juliet clauses to address that issue in as far as the laws are concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take a call here from Otieno Menya, who's calling from Kisumu, and hear what he has to weigh in regarding this discussion. And for anybody else who'd like to call, you're welcome to do so. Otieno, what's your thoughts, your comments, or question?
On culture, a number of factors. And the most obvious factor is the economic status of the parents. Yeah, you find maybe a parent is staying in a single room with a girl child, and maybe in this small child, a girl is maybe sleeping just down near the bed, and this is where now they are doing the sex. So you see, the child is growing knowing that there is something called sex. And then they get influenced psychologically. Also, on the economic status, there's a number of things that a girl child would want, and the parent is not able to provide. And that's why now they get tempted. They are touched by these, we call them timosisi. So you see, that's one of them. Then also the eating habit. There are a number of things that we eat that really catalyze the hormones in our body. And also our culture. Like now, we have decided to become westernized. Okay. We get westernized. And now the dressing code, my dress is my choice. So you see they expose...
Yeah, okay, and I'd be interested in hearing about those foods that you've mentioned that, which foods are those, or what do you mean?
Yeah, there are some of the foods, that they have got some chemicals in them. And those chemicals, they also contribute in how the hormones operate in our body system, yes.
All right, thank you very much, Otieno Menya from Kisumu. Anybody else with a call, you're welcome to do so. But coming to you, let's start with the first part of his comments, and that's to do with economic status. We cannot downplay the economic conditions of some families in how their children end up now either being abused or manipulated.
Absolutely. And I agree with him on the issues of economic and some of the needs that girls have. We had a large issue, actually it's a perennial problem, whereby girls could not even afford sanitary towels. So there was this documentary that actually was done by KTN and Equality Now on sex for pads, whereby girls would trade in sex so that they get sanitary pads because they need to be in school.
Correct.
And this is every month, yeah? But through advocacy, the government did an amendment to the Basic Education Act. And now there's a provision for quality sanitary pads for all girls in public schools. That is great. Therefore, the issue of families that are coming from low-income communities is something that also needs to be addressed. But I'm a firm believer in an informed adolescent girl. If they know their rights, if they know what to do in case someone is trying to manipulate them or coerce them into sex, because they have that information. Definitely they'll make a very informed decisions that will be life-changing in terms of their reproductive health.
He also brings in an interesting point here, and we're talking about consent and dressing. My dress, my choice. And there was a debate of who really is at fault, because if a lady wants to dress the way she wants to dress, that's fine. But then there is what you'd call a social contract of what people, perceive and see. What are your thoughts in that regard? Because there are those who might argue and say that dressing really does not come in anywhere, because if she dresses the way she wants to dress, that's her dress, her choice.
Dressing is a non-issue in as far as sexual and gender-based violence is concerned. We have communities, even in Kenya, where they do not even...
they go topless.
Yes, they go topless. Yes. How come the rates of rape, defilement are not high there?
So what is the cause of the defilement and rape in areas, or let me say urbanized societies, where you're all covered up, and that is what is thought to be the norm, and somebody maybe decides to break that, and I call it a norm here very lightly, because who decides what's normal? But in a society, that's why I'm calling it a social contract. So within an urban setting, there is that social contract that this is what is acceptable dressing.
Yes. I agree with you. There are some places that dictate what you're going to dress in. Like when you're going to the office, when you're going for a party, definitely you dress differently. However, for me, the issue is how a lady is dressed or how a woman is dressed is a non-issue. Because these infants, 2-year-old, 1-year-old, how are they dressed such that they get defiled? So we are not,
now that's,
or even we had cases of 78-year-olds, 90-year-olds who are being raped. So we cannot say it's because of how people are dressing. Whereas we have communities where people really go topless. They not even, they just put on a piece of clothing. And that's not one of the reasons as to why cases of rape and defilement are high. The reasons why they are, one of them is because failure to enforce the laws that we have. As always, Kenya, we've got really great laws, in my opinion, that have a wide-ranging provisions that can protect women and girls from sexual and gender-based violence, and even men and boys, they are also covered in those laws. However, the failure to enforce them, perpetrators go scot-free. So that if you rape this girl, you're not going to be brought to book.
You'll get away with it. And I'll ask you to hold that thought, because I want to take a call from Davis Neto in Mombasa and just hear what his comments are. Davis, you're now, what's your question or comment?
Yes.
Davis, kindly go ahead and please put the volume of your television off, otherwise we'll not be able to communicate. Davis?
Okay, thank you, Mr. I've done that. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Davis.
No, according to me, I can't support that, because if you get this sexual, maybe moral and the other things to our students, the time will come, they say that let us do these things practically and see how it works, if it exists or it's just a saying. So according to me, I say that let our parents try to advise them, but not to give the teachers opportunity to go and our kids, our children, our generation about these sexual educations. So to me, I can't allow that.
All right, thank you, Davis. We also have Simon Mchuma from Mombasa. Simon, your comment or question? Simon, I'll request that you put the volume of your television off, otherwise we'll not be able to communicate. And Simon, you can go ahead to your comment or your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, nashukuru Simon Mchuma from Sinoko GC.
Okay.
Kwa lapto mimi kwa mchango wangu. Hello?
Yes, nakusikia, endelea. All right, Simon, we seem not to be communicating there, so maybe we'll come back to you, Naitore. And Davis, well, mentions and says that he disagrees to some extent with the teacher having a responsibility. Do you think maybe he has a valid point? Because again, that gives an opportunity for that teacher, should they be rogue, to take advantage.
He has a point, but I think the issue of comprehensive sexuality education is quite collective. The responsibility, rather, it's collective. It's collective. Parents have a responsibility, a primary responsibility, the teachers, and also the state, as I said. And the reason why I'm really emphasizing on this sexuality education being undertaken also in schools, it's because it ought to be part and parcel of the curricula in school, such that maybe pupils who are in class 1, they go through topic A on comprehensive sexuality education. And then from that, it's progressive. It's not something that will be given at one time.
At one time.
Yes.
And then, because we are coming to the tail end of this, the question then would be, what has happened to our society? Because these are guardians. Sometimes we have several issues here. You have minors who engage in sexual activity, but you also have guardians who take advantage of a very huge responsibility that they've been given to take care of these children. And by guardians, I mean teachers, I mean even parents or relatives who are much older than these children. Where did we go wrong as a society?
That's a really tough question.
Million-dollar question.
Yes, it's really a tough question, and I've been grappling with it because in the areas that we work in, even in Kenya, like in Busia, we've seen numerous cases of incest. This is a father defiling her daughter. His own daughter, rather, yes. And we were saying we need to do a research from a social perspective because some issues cannot be addressed from a legal perspective. There is the social issue. What is it that is going on that you get to an extent, you have the primary responsibility as the guardian, as you've rightly stated it, but you're the one who is defiling this young girl. Yes.
All right. What then would you give as a solution to anybody who might be either being defiled or feels there's somebody being taken advantage of? Where do they go?
Firstly, the criminal justice system may not be the most friendly for even the adolescents. I have to recognize that even as I'm offering
that as a solution.
Yeah, that as a solution. Because in cases of defilement, you're required at least within 72 hours to go to the hospital. Then you report, yeah, so that there's an official record in the occurrence book, and then at the hospital, they gather the evidence that will be used in court. But for me, what I really think it's critical is at least if you are defiled, if you are raped, if you're sexually assaulted, at least go to a medical facility, go to a health facility, so that they collect that evidence, they give you medical care. And they'll also give you psychosocial counseling, which is very critical for any victim who's been defiled or raped or sexually harassed. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your closing comments and possibly just advising, especially the adolescents and minors who may feel that they are in danger. Should they report, they have to come back to this home? And sometimes that's not, it actually leaves them very vulnerable, because then when they weigh the options with their young minds, chances are they would rather just be silent.
Now, yes, the adolescents are put in a dilemma on whether to report a case, especially if the violator, the perpetrator, is someone you're living with. But now the question is, the failure is now on the states, because ideally we should be having safe homes and safe shelters across all our counties, whereby if a girl is violated, they can report that case. And as the case goes on, as the trial proceeds in court, then this girl is put in a safe house or a shelter, and she can continue with the education. And for me, what I feel is that we are not addressing the root cause. There are some responsibilities that our state is not living up to, some obligations that our state is not living up to, that it ought to. And I also believe that comprehensive sexuality education is something that we need to offer to our adolescents. It's critical. Time is actually up. We are running out of time, because what we are seeing is an increase in teenage pregnancies, sexual violence cases, early marriage. And when we offer comprehensive sexuality education from a rights-based perspective, then we empower these adolescent girls and adolescents rather, and they make life-changing decisions that will have an impact for the rest of their lives.
The rest of their lives.
Yes.
Naitoria Mathenge, thank you very much for joining us this morning on Black and White. She is a human rights lawyer, and that's where we wind up the show this morning at 10 minutes to 9. So I take this opportunity to thank you for watching and keeping us company, and wish you a fantastic and a wonderful day. Do take care of yourselves and each other, but do stay with us right here on KTN News. We've got news.